The ship prize for Star Trek Online's 2023 summer event has just been announced, and oh boy, is this a cool ship. Here it is, this year's summer event ship, the Hysperian Intel Battlecruiser, aka the Monaveen from the Season 2 episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, Where Pleasant Fountains Lie. Okay, I absolutely adore this ship. I mean, ever since it appeared in that episode, it's such a quirky thing because you never really get to see this level of weirdness in an actual starship, because literally it's a spaceship, but it is entirely themed after like Renaissance Fair type themes. And Star Trek Online did a great job of not just recreating the ship's appearance into really wonderful detail, but they've also brought in a lot of that flavor by renaming several of the ship's abilities to fit that Ren Fair type theme. More on that in a bit. Now, going back to the ship's appearance, Star Trek Online did a really great job of translating this ship from the Lower Decks art style into the Star Trek Online art style, which is meant to be much more reminiscent of the live action shows. And this really stands out because I mean, we've got all these little bits, you know, all this like gold fillery over here. They just added all these little details in here that really make it stand out. The hull plating too, that, you know, really, you know, it's got that much more hull plating look to it instead of just being, you know, they could have easily just made that just more plain looking, but they really went a good job to making it look more like, well, scales, which makes sense because dragons. I didn't get a good screenshot of it, but they showed how the hull kind of reflects light, and it looks really like a lot like how it did in the show, because, you know, instead of like just drawing on like these little scale hull plate type things, they just kind of drew light reflecting off of the ship, and Star Trek Online did a really nice way of kind of recreating that effect in their own way. Now, this is Star Trek Online, and we all love our ship customization. And while this ship doesn't have its own like physical like pieces that you can swap out, because I mean it's an event ship, it's just the one solid ship. There are no customization pieces to swap in and out. They did add this one little bit here that was really nice. You can change the color of the hull plating. Yeah, all this green part right here. That's basically just the first little color node over there. I don't know what you'd call that, but yeah, that whole thing, you can change that to literally any color in the tailor. And that same goes with the second color, which is kind of this edge piece along here, along like the engines and like the side of this the main hull part. Yeah, that's your secondary color. All of those can be changed to any color in the color wheel on the tailor. Now, the gold bits, however, those you cannot change the color of. I don't think even vanity shields will cover those up, because those are like an integral part of the ship. They're not part of like the actual hull material. The way they had to get those to work is they're implemented like a different way. So yeah, you can't change the color of them, and vanity shields won't cover them up. They work kind of like how the Bussard collectors work on the Gagarin class. Yeah, it's something unique to that specific ship. So they're gonna interact differently than the actual hull material would. So yeah, they're not gonna be covered up by vanity shields, and you can't change the color. That might be a drawback for some of you. Personally, I don't really care though. I would probably just leave it as the gold as it is, even if I could change it, just because it really keeps that regal look that the ship is supposed to have. Okay, let me move the camera so you guys can get a better look at this concept art that they showed off on the stream too. Again, look at this. Just the amount of detail that they put into this is just absolutely incredible. This is absolutely fantastic. Okay, now let's move on to the stats. Now, you might have noticed some funny things about this ship, and I don't just mean some of the abilities that they've changed the names of. They called this thing an Intel Battlecruiser, but you'll probably notice here in the seating, there is no commander level Intel seat, and that makes sense because normally Intel ships do not have full specs. However, this one kind of does. Despite being an event ship, the Hysperian Intel Battlecruiser will have the Gather Intel ship mechanic. Though they also gave that one a funny name too. Instead of Gather Intel, it's something like Peer into the Orb or something like that. But an event ship never has a full commander level specialization seat. But they've also never had a full ship mechanic. The only exception being the Risian pilot escort, but that was a whole different thing. I'll get into that in a bit. During the live stream, Jonathan Herlock kind of gave the impression that he was unaware that event ships are normally not full spec. You know, like the only exception, like I said earlier, is the Rising Corvette. Again, special circumstances. After this was brought up, some people were talking about like, is he going to think about taking him away since they don't normally have a full specialization? And basically his response was, well, I already went to the trouble of renaming the power, so no, it's keeping the full intel mechanic. But it's also going to keep that lieutenant commander intel seat. It's not going to get a full commander level intel seat. Now, I was a little iffy about this at first. The idea of an intel ship not having a commander level intel seat just seems to me, especially given that this is a battle cruiser, so the commander level seat is going to be the engineering seat, so that means I'm going to have a full commander level engineering seat, even more. But the more I've looked at it, the more this feels like a really nice compromise, because one of my biggest complaints about event ships for years now has been that they don't have full specializations, and therefore they just feel so much lesser than most other ships, even most C-Store ships. Now, event ships being free, I get why they would kind of want to make them a little lesser than C-Store ships or any other ships that you normally pay for. I understand that. A free ship is a free ship. You don't want it to be too good. But at the same time, if you want people to actually play it long term, you got to give it a little something extra. And that's exactly what they seem to be doing with this ship, giving it that something extra. In this case, the actual ship mechanic, the gather intel mechanic, because this is an intel ship, but not making it too overly over the top. Especially for a free ship, because, they've only given it the Lieutenant Commander Intel seat. So that means this thing is not going to be ideal for like a full Surgical Strikes build, because you're not going to have Surgical Strikes 3, you're going to have to go down to 1 or 2, but at the same time, you could easily do Fire at Will, or even Scatter Volley. I know you'll only have Scatter Volley 2 because it's a cruiser, but I mean, that is a route that is available. So looking on this ship as a whole, even without that commander level intel seat, this is still a 5.3 intel battlecruiser. This thing is going to be absolutely fantastic for energy weapon builds, like, Fire at Will or Beam Overload or Scatter Volley. It's got 5 engineering consoles, so it's going to be really good for those new isomagnetic advanced engineering consoles, the ones with the weapons power. Though with 4 tactical consoles, you could also easily stick with the Spire consoles as well. A full look at the seating. First is a Lieutenant Commander Universal / Intel seat, so you can do a lot of flexibility with that being universal. A Lieutenant Commander Tactical seat, a Commander level Engineering seat, a Lieutenant Science / Pilot seat. Not much you're going to be able to do with that, but that being a pilot seat, you're going to have Clean Getaway, so that's going to be one more unconventional systems trigger. Won't be an additional one because that's already on the Science seat, but Clean Getaway does have a nice cooldown in comparison to most other unconventional systems triggers. And then the last seat is an ensign level Science seat, so again, that's going to be another unconventional trigger. So what I would do with this ship, first off, in the tactical seat, you got your firing mode here, so this would be, Beam Overload, or Fire at Will, or Cannon Scatter Volley. You're not going to have anything specialization focused, but any like the normal energy weapon firing modes. Then over here, probably in the next 2 seats, either you'd have Torpedo Spread and Chemosite Lace Weaponry, whichever one you want. Like if you're using the Maelstrom torpedoes, I would probably put Torpedo Spread 2 in the Lieutenant seat, and then Chemosite in the Ensign. But if you're using something more standard like the Dark Matter Quantum, then I would put Chemosite 2 and Torpedo Spread 1. Now for the Intel seat, that's going to be, again, for more unconventional systems triggers, so Viral Impulse Burst, then Ionic Turbulence, and then for here, you could, go for one of the more basic abilities, so I'd probably put either Gravity Well here, make this a Science Officer, go for Gravity Well 1 here for a little more control, or if you want some more debuff, instead make this a Tactical Officer and go for Attack Pattern Beta. Now, the engineering abilities. In the Ensign seat, I go Emergency Power to Engines, because that's going to feed into the console, more on that later. In the Lieutenant seat, I go Emit Unstable Warp Bubble, because that's an unconventional systems trigger, and then Emergency Power to Weapons, because obviously. And then in here, I would probably put, Eject Warp Plasma, because that is a unconventional systems trigger. There you go, so that's more cooldown for your consoles. The Ensign Science seat, that would just be something basic like Tractor Beam, just because, again, that's a really good unconventional systems trigger because it has a really low cooldown, so Tractor Beam's always good for that. And in the Science Pilot seat, again, you got some options there, because you can either go with more unconventional systems triggers, so like Scramble Sensors and Clean Getaway, or you could go with 2 seats of Pilot Team and then use the personal trait Fresh from R&R and pair those with the Starship trait Synthetic Good Fortune. Those are really good for building crit chance. So yeah, up to you on which direction you want to go with that, but overall, this is some solid bridge officer seating, and it's not going to be anything crazy meta, but it's good enough to work with, more than so. Okay, down here I've got the mastery traits, which that's you know, the ship mastery stuff. They've given them silly names. The first is the Orcalium Scales, and then Claws of the Dragon, Protective Runes, and Draconic Vigor. Sorry, I just wanted an excuse to make a funny voice. Yeah, they're just the same mastery traits as your normal battlecruiser stuff. So we've got some damage resistance to physical and kinetic damage, then crit severity buff, and then damage resistance to energy weapon damage and radiation damage, and then some extra hull maximum hit points. So yeah, it's a normal battlecruiser, just with more fun in it. Now, the console on this thing is pretty neat. It's called the Dragon's Blood Flame Reactor, and what it is it makes your ship shoot fire. It is a big 50-degree cone of fire. It just shoots out right in front of you. It goes up to 5 kilometers in front of you and deals a bunch of fire damage. It'll deal fire damage for 10 seconds to up to 5 foes that are caught within the 50-degree cone that are, you know, 5 kilometers in front of you. While the console is active, it'll put a stacking engine power drain onto your ship, but don't worry, if your engines reach 0, it will not deactivate the console's ability. Instead, what this does is when the console ability ends, however much engine power you have left over, that will contribute to lowering the recharge time of the console. So the more engine power you have, the more often you're going to be able to use this console. That said, unconventional systems is also a thing, so you're probably better off relying on that. You can see the passives to the console got a little cut off because of someone's webcam during the live stream, but you can see here 20% bonus damage to disruptors. That's a passive. That's a nice passive, by the way, especially for disruptor builds. But it also gives bonus damage to several exotic types of damage, and those are the same ones that the trait gives. So fire damage, cold damage, electrical damage, radiation damage, and psionic damage. Jonathan Norlock did also go out of his way to point out that there are currently no space abilities that deal psionic damage yet. So that's probably going to change, possibly even in the near future. It also buffs your current and maximum engine power. Now, the console is clearly meant to play up to a theme, but the fact that this is dealing fire damage is a form of exotic damage. This would probably be better off on something like a science build, particularly a Dusai build, considering this thing also buffs disruptor damage. Though considering that both the console and the trait buff this type of damage, it's not necessarily a bad thing to use on this ship. Also, it looks like this. How fun is this? I mean, look at this. This thing is crazy. It's literally just a big cone of fire. The Starship trait, it is called 5 Magics, which again, further feeding into the whole Ren Fair D&D type thing. It buffs the same damage types that the passive on the console does, so that is going to be fire, cold, electrical, radiation, and psionic, as well as disruptor damage. What this trait does is when dealing damage with any of the 5 magics, that's any of those exotic damages I just listed off, for the next 15 seconds you will gain +5 to your current engine power and bonus damage to said 5 magics and your disruptor damage. That bonus damage buff will have a base of 15% and scale upward with your engine power. From the sound of it, this trait is going to be pretty valuable for disruptor builds, because all of these exotic damage types, these are very easy to come across. Like, I mean, fire damage, the console does that right there on its own, so you've already got a source for that. Cold damage, there are a couple different bridge officer abilities that'll deal that. First one I can think of is Best Served Cold. You can get that from the winter event. That one's good for a damage resistance debuff. Electrical damage, you can get that from the Discovery 3-piece set from the Reputation. You just use like the shield, the deflector, and the engine, not the engine, the warp core. But yeah, use that set for Mycelial Lightning, and there you go, there's your electrical damage. And for the radiation damage, Chemosite Lace Weaponry. It's pretty much standard on most builds these days anyway. So yeah, I don't know if this trait is ready to, you know, break the meta or anything, but this is definitely going to be a very valuable free-to-play trait for disruptor builds. So if you like disruptors, you're gonna want this ship. Honestly, even if you don't like disruptors, I don't know why you wouldn't want this ship, because frankly, it's really cool so far. Now, there's one last thing to talk about with this ship, and that is the unique weapons they come with. Rays of Disintegration. Sorry, just had to take the opportunity for one more silly voice. But yeah, the Rays of Disintegration, these are just normal disruptor beams. They have the same normal proc as normal disruptor beams, which is a chance to apply a damage resistance debuff to any enemies you hit. I don't know if they have a unique animation or sound effect like the digitizer plasma beams that came off of the compiler had. They might, but I mean, Kale didn't really give us a good look at them because, I mean, he literally had one equipped on this thing, and this is it. This is the only good shot I could get of this. And as you can see, they are still just green disruptors. They might have a little more yellow in them, so they might be visually distinct from normal disruptors. But for the most part, yeah, they're gonna look like disruptors, and they're gonna function just like normal disruptors. Also, there was only ever mention to beam arrays, so I don't know if these come in any other flavors like dual beam bank or cannons. I'm pretty sure based on what they said on the live stream, I'm pretty sure these only will come in beam arrays. So yeah, they're disruptors with a unique name, but from what I can tell, that's about all that's unique about them. They're neat, but they don't matter in the long run either way, because, you know, if you're building this thing for disruptor, you're going to want to swap these out for spiral wave disruptors as soon as you can. So yeah, that is the Hysperian Intel Battlecruiser, which is going to be the summer event ship for 2023, which, side note, we also know the start date for the summer event. That is going to be starting on June 28th, so next week, and that'll run all the way through July 28th. I am so excited for this ship. Like, from what we've seen, this thing is going to have fantastic stats on it, largely because it is actually going to have the full intel mechanic, which that is like a whole new precedent for event ships. Normally, that is not a thing they do for event ships, but if this is how Cryptic is going to be proceeding forward with event ships, I am absolutely here for it. Yes, it doesn't have the full commander level specialization seat, but it does have the ship mechanic itself, and that I feel like is a good trade-off for the sake of a free event ship. The only time Star Trek Online has ever done anything kind of like this is with the Tier 6 Rising Corvette, which was released in the summer event of 2019. That ship had your typical event ship setup. It had a pilot seat, but it was only like lieutenant or lieutenant commander. It was not full spec. It did not have the full pilot ship mechanic. However, they introduced an option with this ship that if you unlocked the ship from the event, you would be able to spend a fleet ship module to unlock an upgraded version of the Rising Corvette. This one would be a full pilot ship. I always thought this was a really great idea. You know, the idea of having the option to upgrade your event ship to something more powerful just for the cost of a fleet ship module. I always thought that was a really good deal. Like, think about all the event ships that have been released since 2019, and that we could have had full spec versions of those. You know, we could have had command versions of both the Alliance Raider and the Alliance Battlecruiser, a full temporal version of the compiler, a full command version of the Mirror Gagarin warship. That thing would have been incredible. But when Cryptic announced this idea, most of the Star Trek Online community got so angry about the idea of spending money on an event ship that Cryptic never did this again. Even though it was an optional upgrade that wouldn't change the base ship or how you get it, you would still just get the free event ship like you always have in Star Trek Online. It would just give you the option to get a more powerful version of it for the cost of one fleet ship module, of which you get 13 of them for free per character with your reputations. This was a great idea, and the casual player base just completely ruined it, because how dare Cryptic do something to try to make money, all over the cost of a $5 fleet ship module. So yeah, needless to say, I'm still holding some resentment over that, but if Cryptic is never going to bring back these optional fleet upgrades for event ships, like I really wish they would, this feels like a really great compromise. Let's see what else. Oh, because there are always at least a handful of people who ask this question every time, despite the fact that they should know the answer by now. No, this ship does not come with a unique ship interior. Yes, I really wish they would too, but it's not going to happen. You know it's not, because this ship's bridge looks like this. That is very complex. This would take them a long time to do. They're not going to do that kind of effort for a free ship. Yeah, I'd love to be proven wrong, but yeah, if this ship was going to have a unique ship interior, I feel like Cryptic would have shouted that at the top of their lungs, given how much they are pestered on, you know, every ship release. Does this have a unique ship interior? Yeah, you know, if it had one, they would have said something. So yeah, like I said, that's the Monaveen. It's got good stats on it. They're changing up the rules a little bit, which I like. It's got some really good toys on it. It looks great, and plus it's a lower deck ship. You guys, we're getting a lower deck ship for free. That's going to be unlocked on your whole account because it's an event ship, and it doesn't have stats that suck. In fact, it has stats that are actually pretty good. This is a good ship, so go play the summer event next week. Cryptic also announced another ship tonight. I'm going to do another video on that. I'm probably going to work on that tomorrow because it's already like 3:45. I need to go to bed at some point tonight. But yeah, hopefully I'll be able to get to work on that tomorrow. They're also releasing a new ground set for the summer event this year. It's a melee set. It's got a sword. It's focused around the, what was the episode called? The Elysian Kingdom. That was it. But yeah, the set is themed off of that episode. I'll have more information on that once the official blog is out, just because I want to see if they're releasing any other items for this year's summer event, because right now it's looking a bit sparse, because all we saw were the 2 new ships and the new ground set, so we don't know if there's any new costume pieces or anything else coming for this year's event. Okay, I think I can wrap this one up now. Let me know in the comments down below if you are as excited for the Monaveen as I am, because, like I said, this is going to be a cool ship, plus it's a free event ship. That's always a plus. So yeah, let me know if you're hyped in the comments down below, and while you're down there, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. If you would like to further support the channel, you can hit that join button to become a member, or you can just hit the super thanks button, or you can find the link to the merch store in the video's description. If you're ever shopping on the Epic Game Store, be sure to use my creator code STU1701 while you're checking out. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it does help with the channel, so I do appreciate it. Either way, thank you so much for watching. My name's Stu, and I will see you guys next time.